Thanks, Mike. Take two, or not take two, version 2.
Yep.
After we had just had Chris, we talked a bit about risk and pricing in the market and the sheep systems, but obviously you and I are pretty excited about where sheep might take us.
Yeah.
It's been a pretty tough ride for many and still a little bit of negativity in the industry. But certainly today I wanted to just, between us, have a chat about what we're seeing in the systems, what we're seeing in the decision-making process with our growers, with our clients, what they're going through with that, and also just some clear strategy plans. And I think to end up on, or start off on where we finished with Chris, talking about prices and cash flow.
Yep.
Maybe just get your thoughts on that plan of sell.
Yeah.
The selling strategy and what we saw last year, and some of the big mistakes, not probably known at the time.
Yep.
But yeah, just I think what you're seeing and what you've seen with your systems work in particular.
For sure. Yeah. I think probably the biggest thing is sitting down and having a real clear plan and structure in the business. So unfortunately the lighter store price, as we were talking about before, has been hit pretty hard. And so I think when there is good prices that become available, and it's like any market, like same as a grain market, there's little periods where there might be a bit of seasonal constraint or a really good rain, and then there's suddenly a more buoyancy to the market, and you'll get these prices that will come through that might be 330 type coming through.
Live weight type prices,
Yep. And
those opportunities we had last year.
That's it. So there was actually $3 that came through for light lambs, and a lot of people were hoping for I guess an extension of the price. And even if it's just you take a position on 30%, so similar to what the Planfarm grain marketing team would do, is that sit down and work out a strategy for the year almost. And I guess the one thing I like about sheep is that you've got a lot more confidence of supply. So we're not dealing with frost. Once we actually have the lambs on the ground, we've got a pretty good idea of where they're actually going to sit. And
let's face it, like the systems are pretty consistent, aren't they? So if someone's really dealing with a lambing in July, or even some of our early lambers, which May we think is too early, but some growers do it really well. You know what that system looks like, you know when the lambs are going to grow, you know how the season affects that. From a year to year, not much changes in terms of timing, except what the year throws up. Doesn't it? So, absolutely. So there's no reason why we shouldn't have that sort of a plan in place. And like you say, is the question, do we actually get rid of light lambs first? And I think we don't ask ourselves enough of that, do we?
For sure.
The same?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even with the year to year, as it's changing, we want to be able to respond to the actual seasonal events as opposed to hoping that it's going to work in a particular way. Like that's one of the benefits of lambing later, is you do have more known factors. So we're trying to encourage more growers to get into that back end of June, early July, even potentially into August. Part of that is to free up the cropping window. Like if we can get crops, particularly your canolas, in dry in early April, start working through the program, that creates a lot of upside. I think the data is pretty strong around the difference between an April and May sowing for canola in particular. And a lot of the reasons are really legitimate. Like if you're dealing with lambing ewes and confinement feeding and those kind of things, you go, well, I want to look after my stock. But if you're over there dealing with that aspect, you can't be putting your crop in on time, or your resources become more stretched. And I think one of the things that we're really keen on at Planfarm is making sure that families are well supported with their decisions. And if you're in a situation where you're feeling pulled every direction, maybe we can actually sit down and work through some of the systems aspects to kind of help create a bit more capacity.
There's a lot of traditional, isn't it? Like there's, and when you say just changing lambing time, it's not, it's crutching.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of things that go into it, So I think last year I wrote an article about the wolf in your system, and it's about a story in the Vancouver area, but people can go back and all that. But I think what was important about that is that if you change something in the system, there are going to be other changes. But we can certainly work through them, can't we? Like it's not, and if we know where we've got to get to, it's us get there for a number of years,
Yep.
but it's actually getting that step
Yes.
process through it. So
Yes.
I think that's where we like to work with our clients. In that, obviously, that confinement feeding has been a big part of the change
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we've seen.
Yep.
You've implemented it yourself when you were on farm, and we see it done in. There's a whole plethora of different confinement feeding setups in there. So
Absolutely.
not one size fits all, but
Yep.
just your thoughts on getting started.
Yeah.
And why.
Yes.
And for our growers out there that haven't done it, and even those that have, how they're fine tuning it. So
Yeah.
what are you seeing in that space?
Yep.
Confinement?
So like you say, there's about a million different ways of actually going about it, but I think that the main thing is to have a really good understanding of your nutrition that you're feeding, and also have like a real clear pathway to what happens if we get to this point and it hasn't rained, and even things like how do we exit out of confinement. So I think that one of the areas we want to do as much as we can is consume as much of the homegrown, if you like, resources.
Conserved, yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and the freight component of moving grains and hay to and from is just dead money.
Yep.
So if we can value add straw, so like high cut straw, testing around 6.5 megs,
Yeah, right.
using that with some confinement probiotic or similar lick to actually enhance the way they're utilising that straw. Finding that kind of system is good for the ewe because she's got a full amount of fibre, she's able to be ruminating, she's not getting these big slugs of barley, and you can understand that when you're trying to put your crop in and you go and try and deal with the sheep, it's late at night, okay, I'll whip in there and I'll drop some barley. You know what I mean? Like it's hard to be able to get all things right, whereas if you're using straw, probiotic or a small amount of lupins in that process, we're going to get a better fermentation process.
So you mentioned lick and the probiotics, so some exciting work you've been involved with. And I guess what is it, without going into too much, because we want clients and viewers to actually to ring us about it, but obviously what's the mechanism? What are we finding? The utilisation on stubbles with straws, fantastic. You know, so I mean, behind us I've only got a few ewes, but they're on lick and bugger all flat, feed in the flat.
Yes.
How are they surviving?
For sure. So John Milton is the one who's really been putting a lot of work into this, and so I think a lot of our viewers will know him, and he's very highly regarded in this space. The lick is a specially selected probiotic for fibre digestion, and so it appears that it's increasing the digestibility of that fibre.
Right.
So we're able to extract more from a relatively low cost, low quality feed, and so that's where I guess the benefit's coming from. So again, it's understanding the nutrition, what's going into it, the costs of it. If we're going and just bombing them with big hits of lupins and similar, we're probably peeing out a heap of additional protein. And so having and also even just, if you look at the moment between a number of different sources, there's a huge variation between what the literature is actually saying and what a sheep actually is required to maintain as far as megs.
Yeah, and every sheep is different.
Yeah.
A sheep's not a sheep.
Absolutely.
So this comes back to those and how they trial it in their own system and own sheep enterprise. I think that's really important because different sheep do respond to grain, hay, pellets, whatever it is, green feed. You know, we often comment that in the high rainfall, lambs don't grow as fast as the X and wheat belt. So, you know, I think that's one of the things about this. So we certainly encourage our growers and our viewers to try it. And, you know, I think it's about the utilisation. That's really important, isn't it? So actually utilising that homegrown feed, low cost, turn it into more product out the gate. On that, so you mentioned before about the sales strategy and swinging back to that and using low cost feed. Obviously, we want our clients to actually take the opportunity of higher prices.
Absolutely.
We believe that they are coming, aren't they? There's evidence that they're there. How long, we're not sure of. But what do you tell someone about, you know, high prices is not for everyone? Because you've got to have the quality of stock there. So what do you see, Mike? Like in terms of not just the sales strategy, but but what do you keep encouraging people to do?
Yeah, I think it's getting the system really clean in everyone's mind, clear for everyone. They know, okay, we lamb at this time for this purpose. It fits in with the rest of our cropping system. We know that as a general rule, cropping is what's driving most of the profit.
Yep.
So we want to maximise the amount of area that actually is going into crop, and then filling in the areas around that with a profitable sheep system.
Yep.
So I think that a real discipline around the cost of production, so knowing it really clearly, and then having a clear marketing strategy for those animals. So I think if we're anticipating and expecting an uptick in prices, I think our livestock reconciliations are showing that when it does change, it's probably going to happen in a rapid rate, because the change has been significant. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And conversely, in the crop, like the season does go your way.
Yep.
The flexibility in the system,
Yep.
which many of our clients I see have. We've got a lot of mixed farming clients. Many of them have a sheep system which is flexible to go up in numbers and down in numbers quite quickly. That's good management. They've been doing it for a long time. I think where the key is being able to do that with the other things that happen in the market. And we've often talked about, and we talk about a lot in Planfarm, particularly with our northern consultants, about sheep profitability.
Yes.
And they know who they are. But really, the profitability in sheep in a good year is all in the crop.
Yep.
Isn't it?
Yep.
Because you can combine things up.
Yes.
Combine it up, run them on less area,
Yep.
which means the profitability of the sheep enterprise per hectare is more.
Yep.
But the extra crop that you can grow. So having that flexibility too.
And that's the system thing, I think, isn't it, mate? Is that you're kind of coming into it, and again, if you're lambing in like more towards July, you've got capacity to read the actual system. So we get a good break in April, another follow-up rain in early May. We're going to have adequate feed supply. So rather than just getting at the other end of the year and going, wow, we've got these fat sheep, actually let's put another 1, 2, 3 paddocks of canola in. Let's jam up the stocking rate, because really stocking rate is what's primarily driving the returns in the livestock enterprise.
Yep, most definitely.
And just have some of those paddocks identified that I guess they're like swing paddocks where, bring up your consultant and with the information of the season and say, okay, I feel comfortable with our sheep. Let's tighten up the stocking rate, because you're then dealing with known factors as opposed to having to make adjustments and hoping that the season's going to go with you.
Yeah.
Yep.
So on that point, and just circling back to finish, and we've been working with a client together on changing a system.
Yep.
Just to finish on talking through how that change happens. Like, it's a lot about change management.
Yes,
isn't it?
absolutely.
And our client will know who he is, and he and his wife are working hard together to make that change. There's also a brother and a father involved. Talk a bit about that for us in terms of, we sort of know where our client wants to get to, but the importance of the step change.
Absolutely. So I think, like you said, to start, that's half the problem. A lot of the time you're not fully aware of, okay, what is the breakdown of each enterprise. So like, what is sheep actually making? What is the canola making? What's the hay making? And then actually start pulling the enterprise apart. And a lot of the time, when we're making those changes, there's good reasons why they haven't changed.
Yeah.
Because that system has worked in combination with cropping.
For a long time.
Yeah, and usually there's something that's taken place over the journey that's gone, nah, I'm not doing that again. That ended up badly.
Yeah.
So I guess the encouragement is actually to identify where it went off the rails and put attention to that, to actually put in some solutions, because there are some good cost-effective solutions that we can put in, but the fear, I guess, of the change is the bit that I guess shows the most resistance. And even when you are changing, one person can be like 2 years ahead mentally where they need to get to, and the rest of the team is going, what are we doing this for? Like, this is crazy.
They're not coming along for the ride.
Yeah.
And I think that's the off the rails thing that you're talking about, is that, and particularly when you're changing a lambing time to go later in the season, there's this massive fear about small lambs.
Yep.
And yet we've talked about a sales strategy that might be very different to what we've traditionally done, which is get rid of them quicker.
Yep.
Okay, there might not be $130 lambs, but at least they're not costly
Yes.
lambs.
Yeah, and it's lambs per hectare again, isn't it? It's coming back to production on a per hectare basis, and yes, we might have smaller lambs, but we've been able to run them at potentially 1.5 the stocking rate because we're just trying to capture that peak feed window.
Yep.
So I think if we can, again, a lot of these changes they're compound. So take a change, see the win, celebrate the win,
add on top,
and then add on that because I think as a general rule we're pretty hard on ourselves when things don't go to plan, but we're not great to celebrate when something actually comes off quite well. I think it's a bit of our Australian culture, farming culture, is just to kind of go, we keep quiet on the wins, and they're probably the ones where I think there's a lot of hard work that goes into the systems, and growers now are having to kind of deal with stuff left, right and centre. So when you do have those wins, I think it's really important to celebrate them and go, righto, we've got to that point, now let's take the next step. For sure.
So obviously, there's been some good research in terms of licks and additives, which is great news, which means we can utilise homegrown fodder and sources, not paying the freight both ways. There's the system changes. Obviously the confinement is not new, but it's certainly a plethora of ways it can be done. Find the one that suits. But start.
Yes.
Have a go at it.
Like you said, even it's one mob.
Yeah, exactly. And it often starts with hoggets or something like that because they're easy to manage, and that's great. So, and we've got that level of people that are just starting to those that are actually lambing in confinement now. So 2 miles apart. The other thing was just around that, making sure we do take stock of the wins. We believe that there's there's some information behind the fact that there will be some better times ahead. So, but have that plan going ahead. So I think if our clients can do that, and those hopefully listening, hopefully it's been informative. Thank you for your time, Mike.
Sure.
Your knowledge in livestock and crop systems is just beyond unbelievable, really, and we're very grateful to have you. But we'd like to finish off, you and I, by telling our northern cousins in the northern ag zone that we believe that sheep are going to be more profitable in 25.
Absolutely.
So thanks, Mike.
Cheers, mate.